Hello there and welcome to Ancient Theories channel. Hello there. Some time ago I talked about Imago Mundi, the oldest world map in the world, and fifth Nagu, the fifth region which points to Bad Gula, which was translated for some reasons as the Great Wall. As you may know, I placed this region in today's Lebanon, and if you want to know more about why, then you are more than welcome to watch my previous videos on that topic. You see, the word describing the fifth region is composed of two symbols, the Bad and the Gula symbols in cuneiform. The tablet is dated to Neo-Babylonian times, which is about 600 BC. However, you should know that before Neo-Babylonian there was Neo-Assyrian, before that there was the Kassite period, and before that there was Old Babylonian, and long story short, before that there was Akkadian, and before that there was Sumerian language in use. Of course, all of those languages are more like dialects with common roots, but a lot of words change and a lot of meanings change. Why is it important? Because we know that the map is a copy of an older piece. For God's sake, the author even states that on Imago Mundi by himself. An author's language is the Neo-Babylonian one. However, there is nothing in his language described as Bad Gula. There is something phonetically similar, which is Bad Gula, and that means the hospital or the temple of goddess Gula. However, the symbols differ greatly. Then why did he use those symbols? You see, this will be a longer video. If we go back to the Sumerian language, then we can find the same symbols. And if we are going to read them separately, then the symbol of Gula can mean the goddess of Gula or adjective great. And the symbol of Bad can be translated as a wall, commonly a city wall, but it can also mean a verb, ascend or climb. Okay, now it makes sense, right? Bad Gula means great wall, or great climb, or wall of goddess Gula, or ascend of goddess Gula. The easiest one is just the Great Wall. That makes sense, right? Well, we have two problems now. First of them is the fact that we just read those symbols separately. If one would like to translate two symbols of Bad and Ci one after another, then you get a wall from Bad and long or narrow from Ci. However, the word Bad Ci means a parapet or battlement. Well, it is still close to separate translations, but not the same, right? And the second problem, why did the author decide not to translate this word from Sumerian? After all, there is nothing even close to that word in Neo-Babylonian. Even the word for wall is different. It has nothing to do with the Bad symbol for the times of the author. For example, in Akkadian, it would be Amuhu for a wall, and in Aramaic it would be Shura. Then why would the author from Neo-Babylonian times use the Sumerian word? Why didn't he translate it to Neo-Babylonian or Aramaic language, which are the languages of those times? Well, there is more than one possibility. First of all, he copied an older piece, and maybe he couldn't translate it because he didn't know the word himself. Or maybe he knew what that word meant, but it wasn't a common term and we simply don't have any other source with that term, or we have but don't know because it lies in a dark, silent place in a museum under some suitcase in a room with artifacts that waits to be rediscovered. Or maybe he copied a really old piece from times when the Sumerian language was still in use and he wanted to preserve this word because it had complex meaning. Who knows? Let's pivot now. Let's go further in time to the times of King Solomon in Jerusalem. The year is about 1000 BC. Biblical David and his son Solomon prepare to build the first temple for their God Yahweh, and they started preparations when Solomon was just a kid. David did the following. Mines copper for the bronze items in the temple, 1 Chronicles 18:8, which makes sense. Secures many cedar logs, 1 Chronicles 22:3-4, and you know where those cedar trees grew, right? Only in Lebanon. How nice of Gilgamesh to destroy Humbaba in his epic, because it would be impossible for David with that monster alive. Prepares detailed plans for the temple, 1 Chronicles 28, which is a necessity in every building project, right? Okay. Contributes his own wealth towards the temple, 1 Chronicles 28:1-4, again, marvelous attitude from him. Fundraisers for the temple among the nobles, 1 Chronicles 29:5-9, because everybody knows that you can't do anything without Kickstarter. Stockpiles materials for the temple and develops friendly relations with Hiram, king of Tyre, who could supply the necessary timbers and craftsmen for the temple in the future, 1 Kings 5:1. Wait, what? Who? King of Tyre, king of Tyrians? Who are they? Those were the people living in today's Lebanon. Those are people who could supply necessary timbers. Cedars, right? And craftsmen. And do you know the name of Hiram's father? It was Abibal, and Hiram's son who became king, Baal-ezer. Sounds a lot like the deity Baal, right? That's because those people worship Baal, and even King Solomon and his father David thought of those people when they wanted to build the greatest temple of their time. It was like there was no other one who could provide the craftsmen. And why would one think that some craftsmen are the best for the job of erecting the best temple in the world for your God? What were their references? To answer that, the official Bible tells us only that quote. The temple, while it was being built, was made of whole, draft stones. Yet hammers and axes, or any instrument wrought of iron, was not to be heard in the temple while it was being built. 1 Kings 6:7. Okay, then the construction workers used other tools. If one would like to keep digging here, there is the Babylonian Talmud, or at least a copy of the Babylonian Talmud from 1342 AD, called Munich Codex Hebraica 95, written, or more accurately copied by Shlomo ben Shimshon in France. The original text is lost, and the copy from the 1342 AD track of ownership is also lost. Then the authenticity of this text in modern times is questionable. Nevertheless, there are more copies of that text which at least have the same root, and they are similar to modern Talmud with certain intake of some things, because any other Babylonian Talmud copies were burnt or rewritten with Christian censorship. And it tells a story of how it was done. And of course there is a demon in service of King Solomon. In some versions he is not a demon but Nephilim, the son of a male angel and a female human. This entity is called the Prince of Demons, in others Father of Demons. His name is Asmodeus or Asmodeus, whatever. This entity is held captive for some time and gives some information about how to achieve the tasks of temple making. The text here in some verses is very informative and well structured, while in others is vague and something is definitely missing from the context. This entity has some human features and behaves strangely for people. Sometimes it laughs at sad encounters, other times it cries at merry encounters, sometimes it helps people with no clear motive or agenda, and sometimes it doesn't. Then, in the later part of the text, Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the guy who captured this entity using his wit and divine tools given to him by Solomon, who was given a lot of favors from God, talks with this Asmodeus or whatever it was. And every time the text tells us of Benaiah, it is very well documented and almost technical. Benaiah gets answers and learns reasons for Asmodeus' actions, which are logical, not insane or purely evil. The thing is that with more knowledge of the state of the world around him, this Asmodeus entity sees things differently than we do. For example, he laughs his ass off when a guy asks a craftsman to create him boots that will last for at least 7 years. Well, if I would go to a market in modern times and ask for a 7-year guarantee, then the seller would just give me an offer for insurance. But not for boots, right? But why Asmodeus find it funny? Because he states that the buyer is going to die in the coming week or 7 days from the time of the encounter. This is an ironic and maybe cynical thing to laugh at, but nevertheless, it is something common in today's comedy. And how can it know about the coming death of that person? Well, magic perhaps, or maybe some sort of technology, or maybe just pure observation and medical knowledge. If you would see someone with a growing tumor on his head with symptoms of, let's say, the end stage of cancer trying to bargain and demanding boots lasting him for the next 7 years, then well, you would be at least confused, or maybe giggling a little. Nevertheless, in another part of the text, Asmodeus tells King Solomon how to obtain Naxian Stone, which is required to carve in stone without any trouble as an alternative to chisels and hammers made of iron. And luckily this part is also the story of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, which means that it is understandable for us without any odd metaphors. I won't go there in this video, but the most exciting part is that King Solomon needed help from Tyrian craftsmen to build the temple, or some other entity was involved in delivering insight on building techniques. Nevertheless, if you believe in the first, second, or both together, all of those points to Lebanon, because this is the region where the demon was captured. More or less, we don't know exactly, and even its existence depends on if we are willing to get credit to some ancient texts. But let me tell you, there are a lot of them talking about this entity in King Solomon, but usually without any specifics. And if you want details, then there is Munich Codex. But there is a funny thing. The Asmodeus asked about the Naxian Stone says that it was not delivered to him, but to the prince of the sea, which in Talmud is Rahab, a woman living in the land of Canaan near the sea. She sometimes is referred to as a saint, sometimes as a prostitute, but the most convincing term for me is the innkeeper lady dwelling at the coast of the Mediterranean Sea in today's Lebanon. And this is weirdly similar to the innkeeper lady met by Gilgamesh in his epic after years of travels while he was looking for biblical No, or Utanapitsi in Sumerian language. Okay, then why did King Solomon go for Tyrians from the city of Tyre and not for this lady? She was probably already dead at his time, but the city of Tyre was called in Akkadian the city of Sur, which means city of rock or city built on a rock, and it is a port city with 2 harbors in today's South Lebanon, pretty close to Jerusalem. And even Herodotus visited it and was told by a priest there that the city was founded in 2750 BC, which is pretty close to the archaeological data we have now. By who? By people of Sidon in the north on the same coast. And Sidon can be translated as a fishing city or a city of the fishermen. What's even more bizarre is that the city of Tyre, or Sur, or rock, however you want to call it, was known for its huge walls. It was a walled place on the mainland, and we know of that settlement and we call it Paleotyre. And yes, it was built around 2750 BC, and the mythical founder of the city is a woman. She is called Melqart by Phoenicians or Melqartu in Akkadian, but keep in mind that those languages have the same roots, and those roots bring them back to the Sumerian language. And hear this, Herodotus visited Tyre because of the temple of Melqart located there. Quote, "Because I wanted to know more about it, I made a voyage to Tyre in Phoenicia, because I had been told that in that place there was a holy temple of Heracles. The sanctuary was richly furnished, there were many votive offerings, and I noticed 2 pillars, one of pure gold and one of an emerald stone of such size as to shine by night. I interviewed the priests of the god and asked them how long ago their temple had been built, and I discovered that they were at variance with the Greeks, because they said that the temple had been built when Tyre had been founded and that this happened 2,300 years ago, yes. He thought the temple of Melqart was the temple of Heracles or Hercules. If you want to locate the thing in Tyre, you can't. The site was destroyed, and on top of that was built a Christian church in the 12th century, the Crusader Church, which is now in rubble too. But we can measure the length of the old structure, which is a little bit less than 60 meters. This is just about the number of meters in cubits on Imago Mundi, which some scholars believe to be the height of trees without any evidence. And no, that city was not Atlantis. But what about the second number referred to Bad Gula region on that map? The 380-meter figure. Was it the height of that temple? I don't think so. The temple was still standing in the times of Herodotus, and he doesn't mention its height, which I believe he would mention if it was 380 meters. My take on that is those numbers referred to something else, but hear me out. What if the term Bad Gula is one term and means a certain rock? Like Naxian Stone rock, which is emery in Hebrew, it's called Shamir, and we know it as Corundite, and we used Corund tools to cut marble. Is it possible that it means Corundite rock, on which the old city of Tyre, the Paleotyre, was built? And when the Bible says that there was no sound of iron chisels or hammers heard, does it just refer that the builders used Corundite instead of iron? Can it be that simple? Oh, and the emery rock is almost as hard as black granite, and you can use it, wait for it, for grinding, polishing, buffing, honing, cutting, drilling, sharpening, lapping and sanding any other rock which is not harder than it. And the emery rock is mined till this day in Greece, Turkey, and it was transported from Naxos Island, where there are ancient mines of emery rocks too, yes, to Lebanon. There were 2 main ports at the time of King Solomon, one of which was Tyre. And in those times the city of Tyre was built on the mainland and on an island about 500 to 1,000 meters from the coast, We don't know exactly how high the water was back then. And this whole island was surrounded by high walls. Yes, the whole island. For better understanding, have you heard about Alexander the Great? He tried to conquer the city of Tyre in 332 BC, and he failed miserably. Well, he conquered the part of the city on the mainland, but the walled island. It was a big no for his army, but his ego told him he needed to finish what he started. And how high were the walls on that island? 46 meters above the sea on the eastern, landward-facing side of the island. He spent the next 7 months building a causeway into the sea because there was no other way to even reach those walls. But this also failed due to a steep drop under the surface of the water at some point. But Alexander just couldn't get over it. He placed on that causeway a few siege towers because why not if his soldiers already built them, and on top of those siege towers he placed catapults. After days of this wobbly artillery attack, he created a few cracks in those walls, put poor soldiers on boats and gave them order to pour into the city through those cracks. That causeway is still there. And he failed again, because the Tyrian navy burnt down his siege equipment and those cracks weren't big enough for people to squeeze. Did he get over it? Of course not. He brought a fleet of 80 ships which conveniently he acquired after taking the city of Ishes from Persians just before reaching Tyre. New wobbly catapults on that causeway, freshly acquired navy and more poor souls put on those boats can get you places. Even those were not enough to win here, but the king of Cyprus sent him 120 more ships and Greece state of Ionia 23 more. With such numbers he got the command of the sea, even if it was the narrow body of water of 500 to 1,000 meters between the mainland and the walls. I won't make it a bigger story. Even if it is quite interesting, it ends with an ambush made with a gambit. Alexander sacrificed more of this catapult on those siege towers and their artillery crew to catch the defenders' fleet. He took the city in 332 BC, after about 7 months of the siege, and he was pretty angry after that. He slaughtered the common folk living in that city and spared only those who took shelter in the main temple, which he believed was a temple of Heracles. Sounds like that city had great walls, right? Alexander destroyed it and the waters of the sea consumed it later. Or at least part of it because we can visit the city by a dry road now. And what was the name of that island? Nobody knows. The Greeks referred to it as ambrosial rocks, but the Hiram king of Tyre connected them, creating one main island from at least 2 smaller ones. It is even possible that this city had a bay inside its walls. Do you remember how this video started? With Imago Mundi and Bad Gula writing on the 5th region. And the city of Tyre was in its golden age after the times of King Solomon. It was a significant place, even Herodotus had to visit it. And he did not visit the place which is now ruins of Crusaders Cathedral, he visited the main temple on the island in its full glory. And that thing is a pile of rubble now. I truly believe that Imago Mundi and the Bad Gula writing refers to the city of Tyre built on those islands, connected by King Hiram in the times of King Solomon, which had walls all around that island which were 46 meters high. I will leave the Imago Mundi artifact for some time now. I still don't know what structure had 380 meters, but my guess would be that it refers to the Temple of Heracles, which made Alexander reconsider slaughtering everybody in Tyre, or it was a bridge connecting those 2 islands built by King Hiram, which could be a marvel on its own. But from today's perspective, it wouldn't be more impressive than artificial islands in Dubai. Are there any divers here? We still can't find a few parts of that city. Maybe you will be the lucky one. Or maybe I should learn how to dive. Okay, listen. There is no proof that Shamir means emery rock, but it is plausible and it is translated as Naxian Stone with a reason. However, I too have some doubts here. I know there is a group of people who think that it is a kind of worm which can penetrate rocks, at least rocks like marble, and people use those worms as a cutting technique. But we did not find those worms or their remnants, and it would be unwise to try to disprove something that well. Isn't there? I would love to try to find those worms, but I don't know where to look and how to start. And I guess everybody else can't figure it out too, so I decided that emery rock is a closer fit for me. but it doesn't have to be for you. At least for now, till we find those worms. There are also people who believe that this Shamir was pre-flood technology or a machine powered by some unknown source of energy or atomic batteries. Again, I'm not convinced here, and I would rather gamble some money that it was the worms, not pre-flood technology. You see, the first temple wasn't built with hard stone, like granite or basalt. It was a softer stone, which could be done with iron tools of those times, but it's said that it wasn't. If one had a piece of technology which allowed him to cut through hard granite like it's butter, then the first temple would probably be made of the finest stones for decorations and the hardest, most durable ones for its structure. Which is not the case. Keep in mind that this project was planned by David and finished by Solomon. For such a long time of designing and planning, there was no place for half measures, but there is a doubt. Maybe it wasn't emery rock, maybe it was something else, and the worms theory has a great advantage because you can multiply them when you acquired only a dozen of them. Don't hang me, okay? Sometimes you have to pick an interpretation, and it wasn't my goal to set this dispute here. I am after all talking about Imago Mundi in this video, let's focus on that. But hey, why isn't the Bad Gula, the Great Wall, referring to Jericho? You know, that place which had those walls in the Bible which was stroked down by trumpets by early Israelites. Exactly why? I cannot be sure, especially if the map was a copy of a truly old original piece. But the archaeological evidence tells us that those Jericho walls were not so marvelous and great after all. Yes, this place was inhabited for a long period of time, dating to 9000 BC. However, the Neolithic walls made of stone weren't higher than 4 meters. Later on, there was a mud brick wall on top of it, but still, nothing crazy, not higher than 10 meters. It is considered propaganda that those walls were mighty and unpenetrable. Don't get me wrong, we are not even sure if in the times of the event described in the Bible there even was a wall around the Jericho settlement, but even assuming there was one, it was not thicker than 2 meters, and its height wasn't that great either. And according to Imago Mundi, the only reason to call it a Great Wall would be a case of the truly ancient origin of this map from the times before the foundation of the city of Tyre. But as stated, the Bad Gula could mean something different than the Great Wall, and we do not know how Sumerians called Jericho. It was standing there in their times, but what was it called in the Sumerian language? I do not know, and I did find nothing about it. But Jericho means a smell or fragrance or some kind of moon deity in any other ancient language, and that in Sumerian would require an ayah symbol for fragrance or other symbols for the moon, depending if one meant god or celestial object. One interesting fact is that Jericho lies about 300 meters below sea level, in a depression. Maybe the missing part of Imago Mundi's backside would tell us about this topography depression. Nevertheless, Jericho or Tyre, it is highly probable that the Imago Mundi 5th region is in Lebanon, in the biblical land of Canaan or in the Egyptian land of Dijahi, which are all the same place, and nobody knows what was it called in Mesopotamia before the Akkadian Empire, the land in the west of Mesopotamia. We can argue about semantics, about details, about everything, if you really want to, but my point is, this is where the arrow on the map points to. Till we meet again.